I need to start by talking about what is happening currently to the Edmonton Oilers. Coming into this season, you look at the Oilers and you say, all right, it seems like they really need to figure it out sooner rather than later, because how much longer is Connor McDavid really going to sit here and play for a team that he's not getting any help on? And now I understand that Leon Draisaitl's there, and they are two of probably the top five, if not the two best players in the National Hockey League right now. But at the same time, when you look at the rest of that lineup and what it has been since McDavid got there, I mean, you had Taylor Hall for a while, but that never really worked out. You had Jordan Eberle there for a while, but that really never worked out. I mean, you had Nail Yakupov as a number one overall pick. That clearly didn't work out because he's not even in the league anymore. The only guy that has really worked out with those two has been Ryan Nugent Hopkins, and he's been all right. He hasn't been great. He has been all right. Now, you look at this season coming in, the Oilers last year, they had a good year in the North Division, and he thought, okay, getting back to the Pacific Division, it's kind of a mixed bag. We don't know what we're going to get. I think overall, the Pacific Division has been better than I expected coming into the season. And Edmonton early on was right along with that. The Oilers were great out of the gates. It helped that Connor McDavid scored a point in every single game for the first, I don't know, quarter of the season, first eighth of the season. He scored a point in every game. Leon Draisaitl was right there with him, scoring almost in every game, scoring multiple points per game. And it's not like they're not doing that still. I mean, those two are still playing at a pretty good pace and still scoring at a really good pace. But the team has just started to shut down. So early on in the season, what did you have? You had Zach Hyman starting really, really well in his first year in Edmonton. You thought, okay, you added Warren Fogle from Carolina. That might help. And the question still remained, how good is this defense? You added Duncan Keith, really old defenseman, but we'll see what he does. You traded away Ethan Bear in the Warren Fogle deal that brought him back. Okay, what does that do? You bring in a guy like Cody Ceci, who had a really good year for Pittsburgh last year. You assign him to a really big contract, so you hope he can replicate that. And then you don't do anything in net. And that's where right now I'm looking at this. You have Mike Smith, Mikko Koskinen, and Stuart Skinner. Those are the three guys that have been backstopping the Edmonton Oilers this year. And early on, they were holding down the fort good enough for this Edmonton team to be one of the top teams in the National Hockey League. Do I think they can get back to that? Yeah, probably, because you have two of the best players in the league. But if you look at their recent stretch here, they've lost 10 of their last 12 games dating back to early December. They've allowed 3 or more goals in all but one of those games. So the question, or the answer, I should say, to the question, what's wrong with the Edmonton Oilers? They can't keep the puck out of their own net. That's the problem. Their defense and their goaltending has not been good enough for the Stars to cover up their woes. And that's what it was early on in the season. It was the defense and Stuart Skinner and Mikko Koskinen holding down the fort just enough that Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, and to a point, guys like Jesse Puljujärvi and Zach Hyman, to be able to get them over the hump because they were just scoring a bunch of goals. But now, I mean, Jesse Puljujärvi, Zach Hyman, they've obviously leveled out a little bit more. McDavid and Draisaitl, instead of going for 2 points per game, now they're down to just simply a point per game, which most people would take that. Most people would love to have two players playing at a point per game pace. But you see the reason that this team has struggled is because they need McDavid and Draisaitl to play at that ungodly number for them to be a top team in this league. And that's just not where they're at right now. I mean, I talked about 10 out of their last 12. McDavid has 13 points in the last 12 games. It hasn't helped. Draisaitl has scored 11 points in the last 12 games. It hasn't helped. This team has dropped in the standings, albeit they have games in hand on a couple of the teams above them. But they've dropped down to, I believe, 4th place now in the division, if not 5th. Let me double check that really quickly. But it is not a good sign whenever you need your star players to play at record-breaking paces for you to keep pace in a Pacific Division that you look early in the season, Vegas is the top team in the division. Now, Vegas was not good. Anaheim is better than them. Calgary has 3 games in hand on the Edmonton Oilers. So the Oilers now sit 7 points out of first place. They're closer to the LA Kings, the San Jose Sharks, and the Vancouver Canucks than they are to the top three in the division. If you would have said that a month ago, the outset of December, how about when the Oilers beat the Pittsburgh Penguins 5-2 on home ice? Connor McDavid had a 4-point game. When that happened, if you would have said, yeah, in a month's time, they're going to be closer to the Vancouver Canucks than they are to the top of the division, I would have laughed in your face. But yet here we are. The Canucks are climbing up on them, and part of that's in large part due to Bruce Boudreau and the turnaround of the Canucks that we've talked about a lot on this show. But what's happening in Edmonton, listen, 1 month doesn't make a season. They're still obviously in contention, but what you're seeing right now from the Edmonton Oilers is more along the lines of what the Edmonton Oilers are supposed to look like. Do I think that, Stuart Skinner and Mikko Koskinen and that held together by duct tape defense is going to be able to get them into the postseason? Yeah, I think when you look at the Western Conference, it'd be a shame to not see Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl in the postseason. But the way they're playing right now, they're losing ground. They're getting closer to the bottom of the conference than they are to the top. And these other teams are starting to get better throughout the season, whereas the Oilers are taking steps back. The Anaheim Ducks are still playing really good hockey. The Calgary Flames, they have games in hand, and they're going to play Daryl Sutter hockey all year long. Like, they're not going to change too much. And then the Vegas Golden Knights. You had a chance to take advantage of Vegas being bad early in the season. Now they're better, they're healthier, and they still have Jack Eichel coming up. And we'll talk about that when we get to our power rankings, because for the first time since our inaugural power rankings, I have Vegas back in there. There's a little tease right there. But when I look at the Edmonton Oilers, what do they need to do? I don't know what the answer is there. I mean, the answer is what do they need to do? They needed to do more in the offseason. They needed to get goaltending. They needed to improve their defense more and not go out and get a guy like Duncan Keith. So at this point, you're going to be plugging holes all year long. It's not the end. McDavid and Draisaitl, listen, they could go back to being 2 points per game after this. I wouldn't be surprised, and the Edmonton Oilers could level out and start getting closer to the top of their division. But for a team that early on in the season was basically running away with the Pacific Division, it was them and Calgary and no one else. For them to be now in fourth place and getting closer to the San Jose Sharks of the world, the Vancouver Canucks of the world, it's not a good look for the Edmonton Oilers. I'm going to take a quick break, but when I return, we're going to kick off the new year with a new set of power rankings. I'll be right back.